guys. Wasn't expecting people to drop in so fast. So right now, I'm in. Right now I'm making a placard for a breastplate. You know, it can be a little bit hard for me to see the chat. But right now, what are we doing? Here it is. Okay. So I had this breastplate from a while ago, just because, you know, I made it. And so now I'm making a new placard for it. I had one before, but it was not great. So we're trying out some new stuff. So what's up with you guys? It's been a little while, huh? Let's see if I can get the chat going on here. Oh, no, that just focuses it. Okay. Let's see. Oh, no. All right. Ah, found it. Yeah. Ah. So just working. This one's for me. This one's for me. Because, see, I ran out of welding wire for a helmet that I was working on for a guy that got just over there. And so, as I'm just waiting for that, I'm making some new stuff. So here we go. Here's the most recent stuff that I made for a customer. It's a guy in Australia. So it's something kind of like that. That's where we're going with that right now. You might have seen some pictures of it if you guys follow on like Instagram and whatnot. But yeah, it's kind of fun. A little bit of a early 14th century sort of bassinet style. Got to make it bigger though. Thanks, Brad. Yeah. Yep, so that's the bassinet there. I've been working on some other stuff here and now, just for you know, for myself, because it's been a little while. It's good for my health, right? So like, I bet you guys probably haven't seen this one yet. Made this breastplate for me. It's kind of fun. That's just 16 gauge milestone for placard. Yeah, you know, I've been keeping busy one way or another between work and stuff. So yeah. So it's a little rough right now. It's thank you. It's a little rough right now just because I just finished folding it out. But eventually it'll get out, it'll put on here, and we'll all be happy. There is a video of that one coming out actually. Of this one, yeah, because this is one of the things that I've made in this new workshop here. Pig nose that, yes, that is something I'd like to do as well. See, the thing is, I haven't had much of an opportunity to make like a hound skull bassinet just because of like the eras of kits that I've been making. I did, you know, like as far as the 14th century stuff goes, you know, I focused a lot on the 1350s and whatnot, and then I've just been started working on, you know, more 15th century stuff. So I kind of skipped that whole time period where the hound skull bassinet was really popular. It's something I'd like to do though eventually. It's a live stream of the shady basement with Madara everywhere. I mean, that just describes my life. You know, shady basement and all that. Not working out working in a little shed outdoors everywhere. The thing I like about this place though is it's climate controlled. There's like AC in the summer and there's heating in the winter. Like right now it's about like 9 degrees Fahrenheit or something out there. Pretty chilly. So yeah, no, you know, show you guys some of the stuff I've been working on a little bit. So we've got the bassinet, of course. Someone said something. My natural environment. Hey, you know, that's absolutely right. Early 15th century. Hey, you know, I'm glad that I can have that kind of effect on someone. I'm glad I can inspire people. So I've been working on some more stuff for myself a little bit recently, just in between projects like that. So this place that I'm working in right now, this really shady basement, right? It's not mine. It's from a friend. It's owned by a friend of mine. This is just the basement of his house. And so the deal is pretty much that I'm just making armor for him in exchange for using this workshop, which works out fine by me. And so what I'm making for him is I've got this this sort of cuirass going on. This is just the front part of it, of course. I don't know how well you can see that. So this is 14 gauge stainless steel. It's really tough. So that's kind of what I've been doing for him, and that's really tough. I just tried fluting it, and I swear it's impossible. It's it's because I've got the little chisel and the fluting form and everything. I'm hitting it with the hammer. It just doesn't go anywhere. That stuff doesn't move at all. Yeah, no, I've been really busy with this. It's a lot of fun though. This way you're a lot complete. Completely clueless amateur to completely clueless blacksmith describes me very nice. Yeah, no, shoot, yeah. I made a lot of the tools that I use now in high school in my shop class, like this tool, which is just a pipe welded onto a stake. I put it into my anvil. Works out pretty well. Alex Kinston, how you doing, my dude? Like I've got that one. I made this ball stake in high school. It's got a little L stake thing. It works out. It works out. So even without dishing, I would say to make some tools while you still have a lot of tools and everything. What is the best steel to make armor out of? Is there an advantage to stainless steel over other kinds of steel? So a lot of the steel that I made my armor out of is just mild steel, meaning it has a low carbon content. The advantages to that is that it's, first of all, it's everywhere. It's I got mine from a machine shop. You can get it at most hardware stores. It's just everywhere. It's really easy to work. It like after going from stainless back to mild for a little while, the mild just moves like butter. It's ridiculous. Stainless steel, of course, is a lot tougher. And so that's not only just tougher as far as like being against weapons and stuff, it's tougher on like your tools and everything. So like, for example, when I was rolling the edges on that breastplate, the face of my hammer was just getting a little scratched up, which doesn't happen with mild steel. And so those are the two steels that I really have experience with. I would personally recommend if you're beginning, is do some more mild stuff, just because it's really forgiving as far as like your mistakes and surface finish and all of that goes. So that would be my recommendation for that. Stainless is really tough. It's tough to work. It's tough on your joints. It's a whole deal, really tough. So maybe not that sort of thing. So mild steel. Yeah, no, that's a good way of doing it. Yeah. And then you get into like carbon steels, and that's a whole different ball of wax. I haven't gotten so much into that myself. I know a guy who has. We've got a joke between me and him where you can just conjure this stuff out of thin air, because that's what it seems like he does. So carbon steel, as I understand it, you can get it in different sort of toughnesses, for lack of a better term, and then you can heat treat it to give it different hardnesses, which you can't heat treat mild. Or I don't know if you can heat treat stainless. I think there's certain kinds that you can, but I wouldn't know anything about that. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to move on to some of the others, because I guess more people have got some questions. Okay, so that's where we're at. What type of knight are you in this category? Kingsguard, Common Elite, 14th century, or Tournament Knight, 15th century. Okay. Good question. I don't think I've ever heard those terms necessarily applied, but so right now my big thing for myself, my own armor, is 15th century stuff, late 15th, sort of last 3 decades or so, which is reasonably about where this sort of thing falls in about. Of course, I'm making a lot of armor for battle, field armor and whatnot, and that just works out well for like the martial arts stuff that I do. But there are some pieces of tournament armor that I would really like to work on. For example, I'd like to make a great bassinet with a couple different associated visors. I think that would be a pretty cool way of doing things. Yeah, there's some like gauntlets where they have like a little rondels disc on them. That would be kind of fun. Jousting armor, that would be cool. The whole Steckhelm thing where it just bolts onto the chest breastplate. That would be wild. I think that would be a heck of a project for sure. I'd say that's kind of the night that I'm going for, at least. Let's see what else we got going on here. Okay, yeah. So we've got a good place to pick up a ball for a ball stake. For a while, I was using a trailer hitch, just in like you could put it into a vise or something, or if you have good welding equipment, you could weld it onto a piece of square stock. All of this is just mild, by the way. I know that a lot of people will fancy high carbon steels, which are heat treated for their stakes and stuff, which is nice because that'll kind of rebound your hammer a little bit as you're hitting it, which saves a lot on you, but it's not strictly necessary. Like for example, for a while I was using a block, or not a block, a rounded piece of hardwood that was just jammed onto a pipe, and it did the job all right. Far from ideal, but it did it all right. So yeah, for a ball stake, I would recommend trying a trailer hitch. Of course, there is that little flat surface on top. You might have to grind that down or weld a little cap on it so that it is totally round and then grind that smooth. That would be good. This one that I did here, this was actually lathed out of a piece of steel. Just put it in the lathe, made it round enough, and then welded it to a block of steel, or a bar of steel, I should say. And that's been working out pretty well for the past 3 years. So yeah, so that's good. That's what I would recommend at least. And then the other stakes and whatnot that you do, that's going to be a lot. That's going to be difficult if you have access to a machine shop. If there's like a maker space in your city, or if you're in high school or something, or at a college or something, definitely try to take advantage of those and make a lot of stakes if you can, because this armoring requires a lot of specialty equipment, like this one, for example, or dishing forms. I know a lot of people prefer the cast iron dishing forms that you can get. I don't like them. I prefer the ones that I made, which are just pieces of round. They're pieces of pipe. I forget what thickness that is exactly. I beveled the edges and then I welded it to another plate. I like this because it gives me a lot more control over where I'm hitting the metal exactly. I'm not always just putting it into the exact same form that I find happens with cast iron ones. So this is my recommended design, personally. But of course, do what works for you. Let's see what else we have. Okay, yeah, good point. You can case harden mild steel. Yep, that is definitely true. I didn't consider that. You can also work harden mild steel to a degree, so if you're working it hard enough, you're hitting with the hammer all over the surfaces. It does harden it to a degree, but it's not quite the same sort of thing that you're going to get with carbon steels when they're hardened. Let's see. Yep, you're right. You're right, Floyd. You can case harden it, but not quite tempering it. Have I ever considered like early armors like Greek and Roman and Mesopotamian? Yes, I have. I've been talking with a gentleman. I think he's on this live stream actually, and he's done a lot of Greek stuff. His name is Sir Bancroft. If you're not familiar, I'd recommend looking up what he does. It's pretty cool. So yes, I have considered doing some older styles like Roman or Greek and stuff. Thing that I'm considering about those is that a lot of those, not all, obviously, a lot of them were done with like bronze and stuff, which is a lot tougher to get. So, and I'd like to do it right. I don't particularly want to do it out of steel and then just make it look like bronze. I would love to be able to just do it straight up out of bronze, and I think that's probably going to be a project for further down the line once I get there, but not there quite yet, unfortunately. Yeah. One thing that I have been looking at doing though is doing Al-Antica stuff, which I made a video about fairly recently. And I think that would be fun because that's kind of doing a Greek and Roman style of armor as seen through a medieval lens. And I think that would be a really fun way of doing it. So stay tuned for that. I think that would be cool. Hey, yeah, you're right. You are absolutely welcome. Fire away your questions if you'd like. my opinion on medieval fantasy stories like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. Those two particular examples, I really like both of those. Obviously, some fantasy things are done better than others. You gotta judge it on a case by case basis. So obviously, when I'm looking at media and stuff like that, I always try to look at the story first, and then the material, things like costumes and items and weapons and things secondarily. So like, is it a good story? Yes, great, awesome. I'll enjoy the story then. And then I look at, like the armor. Does it make any sense? Is it practical? Are they trying to be historical? And all of those kind of things factor into how I see it, at least. So like, I really like a lot of the stuff from Game of Thrones. Personally, I'm a big fan of the costume design from earlier seasons. I know it's not a particularly unpopular opinion to hate on the more recent seasons, and I'm part of that camp. I wasn't a huge, particularly big fan, but if you liked them, you liked them. Although I do think that the costume design went downhill as well, and that's one thing that really gets me. I don't tell anyone else that, but it's like, costume design is a big part of it for me. So, I really liked a lot of the armor design that they had in like some of the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, like through up till season 5 or about thereabouts. It was really cool. I like that a lot of them cut in at the waist, which is a pretty big part of historical armor design. Like, you'll notice that this one has a pretty thin waist, and that's very purposeful because it distributes the weight, obviously. And then part of it was also fashion and stuff, but that's something else. So I like that. Lord of the Rings is interesting as well. I saw that only shockingly recently for somebody who's interested in all of this. I liked a lot of the armor in there as well. Some of it could be more practical, I think, but I'm willing to let it slide. As I say that as if I'm some kind of arbiter of, of fantasy armor. Yeah. Eastern armor. Yes, that's another thing I've considered. I think somebody a little while ago, I don't recall who it was exactly, they had suggested in the comments of one of my videos, was, it was like, I think it was called Mirror Armor or Krug Armor, spelled with K-U-R-G. I tried doing some research for that, but it was tough finding exactly all of it, which was kind of frustrating. If anybody has resources for that sort of thing, I'd love to hear more about it. One thing that that's come up recently is one of my friends who I've met through another group that I'm in, and he also makes armor, very nice armor as well. I believe he goes by Ignatus Armory, something like that. I forget how it's pronounced exactly. Does a lot of cool stuff. He is doing a Polish sort of hussar thing, and he's going to be doing some reenactments for that in the future. He's invited me to a couple of them. I'm not going to be able to make it all of them, but I am going to be trying to put together a kit for that, so he's going to be helping me do the research, and that's going to be pretty cool. So, yeah, so Eastern armor is definitely a thing. I think somebody mentioned some Chinese lamellar, Chinese lamellar. That would be a pretty cool thing to do. Definitely something that I'm not familiar with at all, but looks fun. I've seen a lot of really nice reproductions of it. I know one guy who does some sort of 17th century Ming, maybe not Ming, I don't know, I'm not gonna presume that I know anything about that. But he does some 17th century Chinese impressions. I'm sure that he would be able to help me out quite a bit with that if I asked him nicely. The armor of God has spoken. The early armors. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, you've been doing Geralt of Fangorn. You've been doing some research on Krug armor as well. Very nice. Yes, the mail and plate variations. That's something that I've been pretty interested in. I'm surprised that I haven't seen things like that in a European context, where they have the edges of plates perforated with lines of holes, and then they link the mail into that. I'm kind of surprised, but it's really fascinating design. That's something that I'd like to explore in the future as well. There's so many armors that I would love to make, but I just don't have the time for it. Very frustrating, but that is how it goes, right? Hussar harness, yeah, absolutely. That would be really fun. Is some of my armor strong enough to to either fight or survive dragons? Hmm. Not sure. Depends on the kind of dragon we're talking about. Komodo dragons? Probably. Real big Game of Thrones dragons? Unlikely. Unlikely. Yes, so much armor, so little time. That is how it goes. My favorite piece of armor to make. Hmm. My favorite kind of armor to make is the kind that turns out well. It's always very frustrating making armor where it doesn't turn out very well. That's very frustrating. My personal view on armor is, as far as the stuff that I make, at least in the way that I make it, is I like making armor kind of for the challenge of it and the artistry of it. Like production armor, it's not really my thing. I don't get much joy out of that. This one does not spark joy. Not my thing so much. But I've made quite a few Visby Visby coat of plates in the past. I'm all right at those, and they're fun to make. I've made some with friends. Yeah, no, they're a solid piece of kit. I'd say my favorite part to make so far would probably be pieces of armor for the arms. It's kind of a fun thing to do. I made those Spalders not too long ago, and those were a lot of fun to make. And I'd be interested in doing more arm stuff in the future because it's not really something I've done much in the past. And so I think that's something I definitely look forward to. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I like armor, and I just like making armor, and I like making new pieces of armor. So that my favorite pieces, I guess, are just new pieces, I suppose. The best kind of armor for beginners. That's a good question. It's probably pretty good. I'm glad that somebody asked that because I see that question quite a bit, but I'm usually too late to the party to actually answer it. Depends on the tools that you have, of course. Like I was saying before, Visby Brigandine, that's a good way of getting started. Yeah, I didn't even buy these. I've got more of them over there. Hey, thank you, Floyd. Yeah, so the best piece for a beginner might be a Visby coat of plates. It's fairly solid. There's not a lot of shaping involved. And that's if you're kind of part of the camp that likes kind of easing yourself into something, which is perfectly valid. I think that's a great way of doing it, is just kind of doing it a little bit by little bit and getting into it one bit at a time. And so that's one side of things. The other side of things is you could do what my buddy Casey did, and he just goes immediately straight into the deep end, and he started making a clothes helmet right away. Honestly, the best. Okay, so here's a big part, right? The best kind of armor for beginners is any kind of armor, and the reason behind that is just because you have to get into it and start doing it and getting your hands dirty and getting that experience with making it. And then just doing it is the only way that you'll get better. Oh geez, I almost fell off my anvil. So doing it is the best way to get better at it. Obviously, there's a lot of research and picking the minds of people that know a lot about it. And that's a huge part of it, absolutely. But then just getting in there and doing that, I think that's probably the best way of going about it. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question as well. Do I ever plan on going back and making more traditional armor, 14th century armor? Still waiting on the Mongolian face-shaped helmet. Yes, I do. I do have plans on going back to like the 14th century or so. One thing I'd like to explore is kind of the late 1330s and 1340s. That's a pretty interesting time period for armor, I think. Because I've mentioned this to my buddy Alex before when we were talking about my 14th century harness. He likes it. He seems to like it. I think that it needs to be completely redone. That's my opinion. And so I do think that needs to be redone, and I'm planning to redo it at some point. Once I've reached a satisfactory point with my 15th century armor, I think that I'll probably go back and start doing some of that 1330s stuff again. I've also considered maybe doing like last 3 decades of the 14th century, where the Hound skull bassinet was pretty popular. I think that would be a fun thing to do because Helm Skull is a pretty iconic helmet, and that's something that I'd like to explore again. Many years ago, when I was first getting into armor, I made a Helm Skull visor for a very bad bassinet out of that piece of steel back there. And it had like the right shape and stuff, but it wasn't exactly good, right? So it's something I'd like to revisit, absolutely. Harbor Freight, yep. Hey, thank you, Floyd, for the compliment on the Spalders. I was quite happy with how those turned out. Do I take commissions? And oof, so bit of a complicated story behind that. So like I mentioned earlier in the stream, I'm making that helmet for a gentleman in Australia, and I've done a little bit of commissions in the past, and I'm actually working through a couple right now. And I think that'll probably open up the doors to that in the future, but at the moment, I'm not really thinking I'll take commissions for a while. I'll take a break and work on stuff for myself and work on stuff for my friends and stuff like that. And that's just because, you know, I'm one of those kind of guys that thinks very highly of myself. I'm an artist and I don't like deadlines. You know, not really my thing. So I think at some point I'll revisit commissions, but for a while, probably not. So I'm sorry to crush anyone's dreams about that, but I don't know. This is a hobby. Ultimately, I'm not really making much money off of this, even when I do commissions. So I still got to pay the bills, and I like making armor for myself usually. At some point, and also, I just think that I could get a lot better at making armor. Like the stuff that I make, it does a job. I get a lot of compliments on it, which is very nice, and I appreciate those. But I think that I could do better, and I think once I'm better, then I'll look more strongly into commissions because I'll be more confident in what I can put out there. What about Greek linen armor? Yes, I think a lot of people call that Linthorax. Yep. Bancroft's got my back there. We're messing up 3 Milanese gauntlets. Oh, that's a bummer. I'm sorry to hear that. Keep at it. Absolutely. My thoughts on chivalry in the modern day. Do I think that medieval chivalry has a place? Mostly asking because that's your area of study. Okay. I mean, shoot, if it's your area of study, you probably have more developed thoughts on it than I do. My thoughts on that is that even in the medieval era, it seems to me that it was a pretty loosely defined thing. I'm sure that you guys have heard it a lot from a lot of other people that there wasn't a single defined code for chivalry, and that seems to be kind of what I'm picking up on it. Now, a lot of people will say that chivalry is kind of like a code of ethics, and I can understand with that. My opinion is that I think that you should develop each of your own kind of code of ethics, I guess. Everyone's got to have a code. Just do that on your own based on your own circumstances, and I think that you'll be better off for it, personally. Yeah, I've got some more thoughts on that, but I'm not prepared to deliver them in a statement, so I'll have to work on that. Remind me later, and I'll have to write it up or something. I think that would be a good thing to look at. Absolutely. Eventually, I learned and stopped trying, and just go to plates and shields. Never go. Try painting a black cell. It looks like a lot of fun coming up with the patterns and stuff. Yes. I have been interested in the black salads for a little bit. My buddy Alex and I, in October, we're going to be doing a 15th century reenactment. And I had pitched the idea of a black salad to him, and we're still working out that exactly, but I think at some point I'd like to make one regardless, so maybe that'll happen. We'll see. Terry, hey John, my man. I don't know if you've been here for the whole thing. You can check out the helmet. We've been waiting for the welding wire to come back, of course. But yeah, there we go. That's it. It'll open up and stuff. So, oh, there the headphones go. Earbuds. There we go. Yeah. He's been waiting quite a while for that helmet, actually. Yes. Deadlines kind of hell, absolutely. you ever heard praise the sun before in your days? You bet I have. Shoot, I don't have my great helm here anymore. Dang. If I had that, I'd totally toss that on and do that, but... How did I like the kids in the Netflix movie The King? It was a lot better than a lot of other sort of things around that area. People compare it to Braveheart a lot, and obviously it's a massive step up as far as that thing goes, not only just in like the armor and stuff that they wore, but also even just like kind of parts of the history as well, which I think is really cool. There were a couple, if we're going to get really nitpicky, there were a couple pieces of armor that were out of place, like I saw some Venetian great bassinets or Venetian great helms, I forget what it was called exactly, but they had that kind of hinged cheek piece. That was absolutely not around in the early 14th century Scotland, I'll tell you that much. But yeah, otherwise, honestly, pretty good overall kits. One thing I liked included is the costume design. Is that I'm not as familiar with that time period, but it seemed a lot better. So I'm personally very pleased with how that turned out. Minecraft Anvils. Ooh. I hope you don't get infected on your fingers. From YouTube and Sancho kids. Yeah, hey, thanks folks. I've noticed cats in some of your videos. How many do I have? Okay, so in this workshop here, there's been a pretty decent turnover rate of cats. There's right now there's 4. There used to be 3, and there used to be 2 before that. So it's really just been a steady increase, except for when it wasn't, but now it is. Wait. You meant the king. Oh shoot. Oh wait. You said the king, not the king. Ah, okay. I thought you were talking about the outlaw king. I have completely different thoughts about that. Okay. All right. I'll get back to that. Yes. Okay. What was I going on about? Where were we? Cats. Yes. Very important part about cats. So that's this workshop. We've got 4 around here right now. At my old workshop, there was also a pretty decent turnover rate. That's just kind of how country cats go, I guess. Yeah, no, honestly, it's never the same. It's very rarely the same. So none of them are down here right now. They're all upstairs. But yeah, I don't know. I like cats. The workshop owner likes cats. It's cats. So yeah, okay. So now the King, not the Outlaw King, which were both Netflix things. I have not actually seen the King yet. The whole Henry V thing. I've heard some not great things about it as far as like the history goes, because obviously it was trying to be a retelling of Shakespeare's, and I mean, shoot, I suppose when you take it at that, it probably could be perfectly fine. I'd have to watch it. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know if that's an armor sin or not. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'll release a review for it many months after the after the fact and just get real nitpicky with it. That could be kind of fun. So, question. If there are any changes you personally make, what do you think 15th century's armor would make to the design of the Greek Corinthian helmet? Is there any changes you personally make, or think 15th century armor would make to the design? Okay, interesting question there. So I know that the barbute gets compared to the Corinthian helmet pretty often, which, I mean, that's fairly obvious, especially the ones that have the whole, that kind of T-shaped ocular sort of thing going on. And I don't know, a lot of people will put the barbute as saying, oh, it's this whole, these people were looking at Greeks and stuff and they figured out that they did it so much better back then. And I don't personally agree with that line of thinking so much, because when you look at a barbute, it's essentially it's an overgrown salad, right? It's that's a hot take. Trying to convince me otherwise. That is, barbute is just an overgrown salad. But I can definitely see the relation between the two. But honestly, the fact about that is that it's a useful design when you have the helmet that goes and covers the back of your head and it covers your face, except for the parts that you need to see and breathe, of course, and that makes a lot of sense. So I'm honestly not shocked that that style of armor became popular again, even for a brief amount of time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's my thoughts on the Barbute, I suppose, some of them. Floyd wants to see some of the helmets on the shelf. Yeah, sure, why not? All right, let's see what we got going on here. So, yeah. So this was a bassinet that I made a while ago. I never made a video about it, but you've seen me wearing it probably pretty often. It's pretty old right now. Could have done better now. I think I might repolish it and then keep going with it. I need to fix a little bit of the lining in there. Right on my forehead is this uncomfortable gap of liner, which is kind of annoying. Like, it still suspends my head in front of the steel, but it's just makes my teeth itch. I've got these little pivots on it for when I had a visor on it, but that's beside the point. This is the Aventail, also in very poor condition. This was my visor for my old Sallet, which is currently sporting a perforated steel visor. This is another bassinet I made absolutely ages ago. Just a little one that I was supposed to wear underneath great helms. Nothing particularly special about that. I never got around to attaching an Aventail to it. But, yeah, no, it fits on all right. It's kind of goofy looking, but does the job, I suppose. Let's see what else we've got. This is just a candle helm I made for somebody. So look at it. Here's a fun one. We've got this thing, and yes, it's supposed to be a helmet, kind of like that. This is kind of based off of some 13th century ones, kind of like from the Mac Bible and whatnot. My buddy and I were doing a 13th century reenactment in May, and so I'm putting together a little bit of a 13th century kit. This is the visor that everyone knows and loves. I had it on a different bassinet from ages ago. Pretty sharp looking. I'm currently in the process of refurbishing it so I can use it for my current stuff. Oh boy. Alright. Here's a doozy, right? Okay. Now don't look too closely. So, some years ago, I think it was back in 2013, I believe, I took a trip to Germany. And we were visiting Salzburg, which of course is not in Germany, that's in Austria, I think. Salzburg Fortress. Really cool place, really cool castle, really cool city. Cool stuff. And at the time, I didn't know anything about armor. I was just kind of like, yeah, cool, armor, that's awesome. And so I bought this helmet that I'm holding behind my back for 30 euros. And so this is what we ended up with. Woo-wee, yeah, that's fucking wild, isn't it? So that's just kind of a fun little piece of memorabilia. That's pretty much all the helmets back there. Honestly, all the fun ones aren't here anymore, unfortunately. So, just a simple bassinet. Yeah, it's nice. Big brain. Max the Merc, my dude, how you doing? Talked to you for a while. Minecraft Anvil's on too. Here, let's see how close it gets. Oh, that's not that's awful. It sounds like. Here, we'll hit my anvil-like object. Big fan of that. So, yeah, so that's what we've been up to. I got something for you guys. So just another little project I've been working on, just kind of for myself, in between Fisher Anvil. This is the, I don't even remember what this one is, the one I'm sitting on. This is the Harbor Freight Anvil. It's like 55 pounds for $60 or something. It's really bad, but it does the job. It works out all right. That's just a railroad tie. with a flat top works out great. So what I'm holding here, this is another thing that I've been working on for myself, in between, excuse me, in between other projects and whatnot. And so I'm making my back plate for my 15th century stuff. So, kind of fun, It collapses real nice and everything. Yeah. So, that's where we're at with that. So, planning to get an anvil out of railroad. Hey, thanks folks. Planning on welding an anvil out of railroad. Hey, that's a great way of doing it. I've seen people do that before. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I've got a tiny little piece of railroad tie over there. I'm going to be using an angle grinder to cut that into kind of an angle shape. So, or into an anvil shape. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you guys like this. Thank you very much. So I should apologize now that I haven't been uploading videos very often. You know, I think the last one was like 3 months ago or something. It was that school project that I did. And the reason behind that is just I haven't had a camera for a while. Like I was using one, but and it was my parents, of course, but you know, moving out, and well, of course I'd used it even for a long time after I'd moved out, but they wanted it back, long story short, so I'm gonna have to grab my own at some point now. So yeah. Thank you again, everybody. I'm pretty happy with how this how the backplate turned out. It fits nice. It works out pretty well. So I'm working out a couple tweaks with it. I think I have to move these straps back a little bit, but yeah, eventually I'll do that. Have you ever done a leatherworking vid? I have not. And actually, for the longest time, leather was probably the weakest part of the armor that I made because first of all, I didn't really know what I was doing when I was making armor, but second of all, I just never got anything that was good. I would buy scraps of leather from Renaissance fairs and then just work with that. But now I use veg tan and stuff and actual leather dyes instead of trying to do some kind of vinegar concoction. And yeah, so now my leather is more functional. But I've never done never big projects with leather working. So maybe that'll change in the future. I don't know. We'll see if someone can convince me. Like to see a video about kettle helmets with a face shield. Yeah, I've seen some of those, which are interesting, and yeah, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it because I haven't seen too many historical sources, but I've seen maybe a few. I don't know. Yeah, a kettle helmet with a face shield, that would be a really interesting thing to do. I've considered it in the past when I was making actually that kettle helmet there. I was making that for somebody, and they were looking for face protection, and that was one of the things that I had suggested was some kind of face shield. So yeah, that could be a good video topic. YouTube there's no way you'd be comfortable in front of a camera. I'll see more videos soon. I mean, you know, honestly, when I started about this, I was not very comfortable in front of a camera either. You could probably tell, but I don't know. It's just something that you get used to. The more you do it, the more used to it you get. You better you get at it. It's just one of those things. I don't know. Maybe it helps that. There we go. Maybe it helps that I was kind of a theater kid. I don't know. Shoot. What time is it? We got about 8 hours. Plenty of time. Yeah. So yeah, no. I mean, if you're interested in doing stuff in front of a camera, just do it. Because that's one way you get better at it. So scale mail, another interesting thing. That could be interesting. Scale mail is a little bit out of my time period, but I have done a little bit of like scale armor where it's like riveted to a foundation material, which is kind of the more medieval style of doing things. That would be pretty interesting. I'd be interested in doing that at some point. Would I recommend a kettle cast iron kettlebell for dishing form? That could probably work out, yeah. So the thing is, when you're considering tools and whatnot for armoring, your biggest friend is just being creative and avoiding a sense of functional fixedness. And that'll get you really far, I think. So like using a kettlebell or using a ball hitch or something, I know some people thought that what I did when I was making Verveils was creative, where I put it into put a brass rod into a drill press, and then kind of use that as a lathe. That wasn't something I'd seen done before, but it made sense to me. And so really, the thing is, as far as, because when we're making armor, we've got a end goal in mind, right? Like we know what it wants to look like. We have plenty of historical examples and stuff. We know what we want it to look like. And so the fact of the matter is that however you get there is mostly immaterial, right? Obviously, if you want to do it like a historical way, perfectly valid. That's honestly really cool. Doing stuff more historically is something that I'm interested in, because obviously I use a lot of welding, and some of the techniques that I use aren't particularly historical, but definitely, definitely something that I'd be interested in. But yeah, so when you're thinking about tools, just consider will it get the job done, and that's pretty much what you need to know, I think. So, if you have time between armoring school, have a book written. A Great and Terrible King. Interesting. Okay, I'll have to remember that. A Great and Terrible King, about Edward the First. Interesting. I've got some more time now, so hey, I'll keep that in mind. Who's the author for that one, Kyle Burrow? That would be interesting. Oh, Mark Morris. There, I had to scroll down and see it. Thank you very much. Thanks for the recommendation. I think really great content. Do you have any interests, even remote plans, to work on a Polish winged hussar kit? Well, maybe not strictly Polish winged hussar, but I'm not sure if you were here for just a little bit earlier in the stream, but a friend of mine is actually doing a Polish winged hussar kit, and he's invited me to his reenactment group. Of course, he's in like Pennsylvania or something. No, not Pennsylvania. Somewhere around there. And I'm in Wisconsin, so it's a bit of a drive, but yeah. So that kind of winged hussar time period location, definitely something that I'd be interested in, and I'm planning on doing that in the near future, I think. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a pretty fun project, because there's a bunch of like terms for armor and clothing and things that I have no idea what it means, because it's all in Polish, of course. So that's going to be quite the journey. Absolutely. Any books on armoring? Yes. So, I haven't read many books on armoring myself. I just kind of took what I saw off the internet and just kind of kept going with it. And take that how you will. You've seen the work that I've done. So I haven't read any books. I've heard that I think it's Brian Price or something. Reproduction techniques of the late medieval ages or something like that. Medieval armor. Oh, I forget who it was by. Yeah, honestly, okay, maybe on second thought, I can't really recommend too many books because I haven't read so many and I can't remember them off the top of my head. It's a good place to ask. It's called the United League of Armorers. If you're on Facebook, of course. That's a really good resource for this sort of thing. The Armor Archive, that's spelled with a U, ARMOUR, archive.org. It's another good online resource. And so those will both be good for getting recommendations for reading, but also for like just general information posed specifically to people online. So that's what I would recommend at least. Made Dakota plates, but used tooled leather for the steel. Shell. I have not actually. I don't think I've ever seen that done historically. If you can point me to any sources, that would be very cool. But I've considered doing a leather covering, but I haven't really done that just because I don't particularly like my coated plates having the leather foundation. I prefer to have it with a canvas or something. Both just because, first of all, that's what I understand to be historical most of the time. But also just because leather is a lot more expensive. So that's my thoughts on it. I think I elaborated a little bit on that in my coated plates video, but it's probably worth elaborating again at some point in the future if I ever revisit that. Biker's armor, jackets with steel plate, and like that would be interesting. I mean, that's kind of just a rendition of a coat of plates, isn't it? I suppose, but that could be interesting for sure. I-33. I've done a little bit of I-33. I would have just kind of broad buckler stuff, generally speaking. So yes, I have absolutely considered a Talhofer buckler. That looks really cool. I'd be really interested in seeing how the shape of it and like kind of barbs and whatnot that it has could really how the swordplay goes. There is one excellent example of the buckler that's very similar to the Talhofer bucklers, which I think is very interesting. And I'll when I get around to that, I will use that as a ref. It's surprisingly small. It's like this big. It's like just enough to put your hand in and not much else. So that's absolutely something that I'll be looking into, I think, to tell Talhofer stuff. Have I ever been to Pennsic? I have not. I don't actually do much stuff with the SCA. I've done a little bit of the rapier stuff, just because I find that supplements my HEMA stuff more significantly. But I've never done like the heavy SCA combat. That's not personally not really my thing. I don't want to disparage anybody who, of course, it's perfectly valid in its own way, but it's just not for me. So never been to Pennsic. Quite a drive. Not into the SCA as much. There is a local chapter, of course, but it's just not my thing. Friendly people, lovely organization, but there's a couple gripes I have with it. But that's for another topic, right? So I'm just gonna grab some water real quick. Because I just had like a couple handfuls of peanuts before I started this, and just been talking the whole time. Okay, that'll do. Okay. Another question from Mr. Bancroft, or Sir Bancroft. Natural vinegar and salt method to clean rust off my armor is what technique do you use yourself? I've never done the vinegar and salt. I've heard about that quite often. For myself, generally speaking, what I will do is, of course it depends on the armor a little bit, is usually some variety of abrasive. My armor, the final step in polishing that I do now is I use a Scotch-Brite pad, the kind that you would clean dishes with, and olive oil, and that kind of blends the surface of the steel together and gives it a nice sort of look. And so when I get rust on my armor, I'll just use that exact same technique. I'll take the Scotch-Brite pad, drop some olive oil on it, and then just rub the surface of the armor, and that usually does the job for me. So that's what I would do at least. Yep. He's right. Leather can also go moldy and dry out, and so that's why I don't really use it so much for coats of plates, because then, yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't see many advantages to armor to leather over like canvas for coats of plates, and so I just use the cheaper option that's just as effective, and from what I understand is more historically based. So that's my thinking at least. What would be my opinion on the onion-shaped knight armor set from Dark Souls trilogy? I know what you're on to. That's a funky design. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but that's a funky design. It's very stylized. I wouldn't exactly call it practical, but it's something. The one thing I like about it is that there's a lot of compound curves, which I think is good. No, our armor isn't flat. There's a lot of curves to it. So that's my thoughts on that. At least I don't know if you'd like me to elaborate more, but it's a funky thing. The helmet is probably the weirdest part of it. It's some kind of great bassinet looking thing. I'm sure it could be done, but maybe not the best. Oh, I get a lot of people going for jack chains. Yeah, jack chains, that would be interesting. Another thing, I mentioned before that Alex and I are considering doing 15th century reenactment, and that's right about where jack chains are pretty common. So that's definitely something I'll be doing in the future, I think. It's very likely, at least. So I'll definitely make a video for that. Looks like a fairly straightforward project, so yeah. Whole suit of bike armor. Oh dear. Helmet, goggles, chaps, boots, all the shiny steel plates. Not even need leather, just use canvas or down. I'm sure it's possible. Absolutely. I mean, hidden armor is a really interesting thing. When I get talking to people about like hidden armor in the modern time period, context, it reminds me of what they did a lot in historical context. Like consider like 15th century stuff, a lot of times common soldiers and of course soldiers of wealth would just wear civilian clothes over top of their armor. I mean, not like pants and stuff over the armor, but like a jacket or something. So like in the late 15th century, for example, you see a lot in German artwork of dudes wearing breastplates, just normal breastplates, nothing special about them. And then over top of that, they would be wearing this, essentially what amounts to a jacket. And keeps you warm, covers up the armor if you don't like the way it looks. So yeah, so maybe that's an option for your biker armor. If you can just wear any sort of low profile armor underneath it and then just throw on a jacket over it, right? It's definitely one way of doing it. That's the way I would do it, probably. Yeah, like a Jupiter and Kingdom Come Deliverance. I haven't played that game actually. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and it looks like a lot of fun. Oh, I see what you're saying about that lobster. Yeah. Okay. I mean, shoot, yeah, just take the jacket, I suppose, or whichever garment that you're doing, and rivet on the plates on the outside of it, or wherever you'd like them. As long as you have a strong enough foundation material, then you're good to go, I think. Updated scale helm sometime. Yes. Oh, good. I got something to show you. Okay. So a little while ago, I made that video about a scale helmet and stuff. Spoiler, scale helmet didn't really turn out very well at all. It was actually really poor, and so I beat the shit out of it. And made a whole video about it. Lots of fun, good times. But a while ago, even before that, I had made an Aventail, a scale Aventail, for one of my bassinets. Excuse me. And so, but I've since taken that all apart, and I've taken the scales, and I've started making a new scale helmet. And so I'm just using roofing nails to hold it all together, and I mean it's something. So this one that I'm kind of going off right now, excuse me, it's based off of the some of the ones that you'll see in the Karlsruhe Passion of the Karlsruhe Passion. Very detailed, interesting painting from the 1430s, I believe. Really cool stuff. So eventually I think I will make a video about this. Will I ever make weapons? Yes, I will. In fact, let me show you something. Ow, I just sat up wrong. Alright. So in late 15th century England, they had these swords that we might call hangers, but it was essentially just analogous to a falchion. And so I'm making a little reproduction of one here. And so I'm trying to keep it accurate sized and all of that. It's got the little noggle and everything, and that knuckle bow and whatnot. There's one that's I'm basing it off of. This one is based off of an extant example that's held in the Royal Armories. Yeah, Royal Armories. The blade was pre-existing from a sword that a buddy gave me because the hilt had broken on him and he didn't have any use for it. So he gave me the hilt. I've cut it down and trimmed it up and everything, and I'm building this this hilt for it. And so that's kind of a fun little project. Obviously, it's not all put together yet. So that's one item I'm working on as far as weapons go. And that is very slow going. I haven't worked on that for a while. And then the other one that I'm doing is this longsword here. So once again, the blade is an existing one. It's a Hanwei Tinker longsword blade. So probably not going to be used for sparring, but it's something. And then the crossguard, or the pommel actually, is from this sword originally. And then the handle is from a different sword that was rejected because it got all beat up and stuff. So yes, I'm working on some weapons and stuff, and it's a lot of fun, very cool stuff. It really goes hand in hand with the armor and whatnot. Yeah. So back onto KCD. Yeah, it looks like a really cool game. There's a lot of attention to historical detail. You're right. Um, yeah, I really appreciate that. In some of the stricter circles about armor and stuff, you get people saying that it's not as close as it could be. This is out of place and that's out of place, which they're right. It is if you're going strictly historical. But let's be honest, right? Kingdom Come Deliverance is a massive step forward as far as historical games go and whatnot, and not even just in the armor design, but also seems like kind of how it's function and stuff, which is pretty cool. I think I still have yet to play it because my computer's kind of a turd. So yeah, we'll get there eventually. WD-40, yeah, yep. So actually, as far as like armor maintenance, one thing that I'll use, like after I'm done sparring with it, I'll take it off and I'll spray it with an oil that's called REM oil, REM oil. It's used primarily on gun barrels and just guns in general, I guess, which obviously here in the United States is pretty easy to get a hold of. So I've got no shortage of that, and I don't know what kind of availability there would be like that for people in other countries which don't quite have that sort of propensity for guns and whatnot. Oh, 1 second. One of the cats has come back. Look. So, yeah, oh, she wants to leave. So yeah, REM oil is a really good one, just because it's specifically designed to keep rust off of metal. So I'm a big fan of that. I've heard of people using WD-40, and I mean, hey, if that works for you, then it works for you. So, but if anybody's out there looking, after I'm done with my armor, I'll just take it off, I'll spray it down with some of the REM oil, spread it out with a towel, and then pop it in a bag, and it's all good to go, and that's kept my armor going pretty well. Bone armor. I think that there is a prehistoric Siberian piece of armor, set of armor that was made out of bones, which is actually pretty cool. Give that a look. Alex, so unfortunately the scale helmet, after I absolutely destroyed it, pretty much unsalvageable, I think. Yeah, most of that ended up in a scrap bin and got recycled. Yes, Bancroft is right. The scale helmet is the thing that brought me and him into contact. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. That was pretty cool because we've got this whole thread going where the subject line is scale helmets and whatnot. Yeah, so that's a little update for you, right? That's the most up-to-date, state-of-the-art scale helmet I've got. The pads on your bike gear are soft and becoming rigid under impact. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yep. WD-40 is a pretty popular one. Yeah. The battlefield armor set in World War I, is it practical? Yeah, I think you're right when you say that it was based off of a actual piece used in World War I. I don't recall much about the Battlefield 1 set precisely, but I do remember other examples that were used in World War I. Some Bashford Dean pieces. Bashford Dean was the curator of the Arms and Armor of the Metropolitan Museum of Art during the time of World War I. And the U.S. Army actually commissioned him to design some pieces of armor that could be used for troops during the war. And so there's actually a couple of those that are still out there. Mostly just the prototypes, unfortunately. I never really made it into production. I think it was too late period in the war or something similar. But yeah, it's actually really fascinating, some of the body armor in the modern period as far as like that sort of things goes. I actually went to a local museum in my city where they had a breastplate from the Civil War, the American Civil War. So we're talking like 1860s there. So that's pretty cool. Can't really go down to the Bunnings and get granola. Yeah, I know, it's kind of an American luxury, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a particular kind of oil that it is. Maybe if you could find some that's not that isn't shoot that isn't that brand name, or maybe even just finding some online and getting that ordered to you. I find that it works very well, personally. So did a study in the Message Bible. Have you noticed the Persian Arabic? Hmm. You know, actually, Kyle Burrow, I have not noticed all those inscriptions. 13th century isn't my thing as much. I've only barely started going into it with that helmet and whatnot, so I'm only at the very, very tip of it. So no, I haven't actually noticed that. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more. That sounds really cool. What is it called? The Persian Arabic and Judeo-Persian inscriptions. Interesting. I wonder what sort of significance they have to that exactly. That sounds cool. Alex Price, what are you on about? Do you like cheese? Do I like cheese? Of course I like cheese. Who doesn't? I grew up in Wisconsin, During the process of Mac Bible, we moved around a lot. Oh, okay. Interesting. That's very cool. Huh. Nice. Yeah, well, like I was saying before, like 13th century stuff, not so much my period, so I haven't really looked too much into Mac Bible. I will bring that up to somebody that I know, though, who is interested in that time period. I'll see if they know. I'll see if they are familiar with that. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Excuse me for a moment. Peach Castle, maybe mail. That's some curds really good. You got to come visit sometime. Maybe we'll have a meetup or something in Wisconsin, right? See how many Living Manuscript fans we can cram into one spot. That'd be kind of fun. Have I read or watched Berserk? I have not. I know somebody that is rather into it, so I've absorbed the tiny. Yep, Cap. You saw it. So yeah, I haven't read that. You can read the Wisconsin Cheese Castle. Yeah. So fun little story. In my hometown where I grew up, there's a park. Okay, so spot where I grew up, right? It's in a city, and it is like one of two places in the world that still makes Limburger cheese, which is kind of cool. And I guess that's our claim to fame. If any of you can name the city based off of that description, you'll I don't know, I'll say that's cool or something. So yeah, Cheese Castle. So in that city where I grew up, we had a little park where it was when we called it the Cheese Park, because of course we did, because all the little towers and stuff that they had on this wooden structure had kind of a little Swiss cheese motif going on. It was kind of fun. I heard about the theory that Greek armor may have been made out of both bronze and steel. I have not. That's a good point, is that bronze definitely survives a lot better in that sort of thing. So yeah, and then we kind of just get like a survivorship bias based on only the bronze ones. So no, I actually haven't heard much about the steel. I would be interested in seeing some more about that. If you want to shoot me a message or something, that would be cool. Because that definitely make sense. I don't know how much evidence there is about that, of course, but yeah, that sounds interesting. The Tusk helmet. Make a Tusk helmet. That would be interesting. I'll have to see what kind of tusks they are exactly, but I haven't heard of that actually. Well, wait, no, there are some like Bronze Age ones that I've seen. There are some Bronze Age helmets that I've seen where they have that kind of tusk helmet. That's interesting. Hit me up about that. We can arrange something, I'm sure. Okay, so the Mac Bible was originally written for King Louis. It was in possession of the Cardinals. Yeah, okay, take your time, Kyle, with that. I will, yeah. The thoughts on this Zweihander from both Dark Souls and real life. Well, I mean, it was used pretty, Nicholas, he's got it. You found me. You found me, Monroe, Wisconsin. Oh, my man. Yep, that's it. With the biannual cheese festival with the very aptly and creatively named cheese days. Wild, yeah. We called it Munro Funro when I lived there. Don't anymore. So my how did you thoughts of the Zweihander? I mean, historically, it was used for a pretty, as far as I understand, a reasonably long time. Long enough for there to be a lot of surviving examples and references and fighting treatises and whatnot. So I suppose it has its merit just like any other weapon. I've played around with them a little bit. I know a guy who's got a couple great swords. They're a lot of fun to use, a lot of fun to play around with, a lot of fun to swing. Yeah, real meaty swords those are. I mean, like, because I think they're the ones that I've used are like 7 or 8 pounds, and I think that it was pretty average. Yeah, those things they pack a punch. They're pretty wild. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those. I would like to learn more about fighting with them. Yeah, but I'm gonna be honest. I don't know anything about the ones from Dark Souls. I've never played Dark Souls. Can't really comment on that. Monroe, Wisconsin. God, you got it. Hold on. So it was gave as a gift. And okay, so he had the Latin translated into Persian, and so the oh, interesting. That's very cool. I love the kind of history that artifacts like that have, just from their different owners and whatnot, and that kind of prescribes its own history to the object more so than just what it was initially intended to, which is pretty cool. So thank you for pointing that out to me. I'm happy to have my knowledge expanded like that. That's very cool. Howdy from Michigan. Howdy, neighbor. Are you in the UP or in the mitten? Let me know. I know a guy who's also from Michigan. Bancroft, I will check that out. Yeah, I mean, you commented before, I've been pretty busy, but it's no excuse not to check my emails. I'll give it a look, so I'm sorry if I haven't responded to that yet. Would I get into trouble if I brought a 15th century handgun or mortar to heat a club? Good question. Depends on the club, right? I don't know if there are any treatises for 15th century stuff, but obviously we know that they're really common in the period. So, hey, Kyle, no worries about the Mac Bible. That was really cool. That was really cool. I didn't know that about all of that. So thank you for pointing that out to me. Yeah. No, just like the history behind certain items is really cool, even like in the modern era. Like, for example, consider the Avant harness. That's been through a bunch of different hands, and that kind of changes the way that we see it now, which is pretty cool. Obviously, the way that we see it now is different from when it was intended. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Ian Laspina's digital recreation of that, but that's a pretty cool glimpse into just how that process of changing hands and all that can change the item. And obviously, we have to be very careful about that sort of thing in armor recreation. For example, Bashford Dean, who I mentioned earlier, who even for all of the good that he did for the armor community and the study of it and all of that, he did, which in fact he did do quite a bit, I think. But he also did, cut up certain historical pieces so that they fit with other pieces, and it's important to be aware of that so that we're not recreating the wrong thing, of course. So, yeah. Low Peninsula on the bridge. Nice. My favorite manuscript for armor. That's a good question. I've never had somebody ask me that before, actually, surprisingly enough. Depends on the period. I think that there's a certain, in the 15th century, there's a certain Burgundian manuscript which is another version of the Chronicles of Froissart, which I didn't pronounce right. Froissart? Something like that. Chronicles of. And it was a 15th century retelling of the original document, which of course there were many of, and I don't recall exactly the inventory number for it, but it is very nice, and it's on a website where it was very nicely scanned, so you can zoom in very far onto all of the tiny little details and stuff. So yeah, that's a big one for me for 15th century, and I see you're mentioning the Romance of Alexander, which is my favorite for the 14th century. Absolutely. There's a lot of fun stuff going on with that. You get a real cool glimpse into that kind of, excuse me, that kind of Low Countries style of armor, which is really cool. It's very detailed, of course, and of course the Bodleian Library has done great work with digitizing it so that we can see all those tiny little details, which I love about it. That's really cool. Big fan of that. Let's see, did I miss anyone? Oh, yeah, tons of useful mid 14th century stuff. And honestly, if I do, when I do return to the 14th century, that'll probably be a big part of the inspiration for what I do. What do I think of the design from the? Oh, geez. The Elven Paladin armor from Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember what that looks like. I've got no idea. That's something I have to look back at. If it's in the original trilogy, I'd probably think it was fine. Again, it's fantasy armor. I don't get my how does it go? No, not. I don't get too twisted for saying that, or for seeing that sort of thing. Yeah. Kind of nice working in the basement like this. It looks similar to Lorica Segmentata. Okay, shoot, it's honestly not even, still not quite ringing the bell for me. The last time that I watched The Lord of the Rings was actually on New Year's Eve, and leading up to that, my little group that I was with, we timed it so that the moment the ring fell into Mount Doom, that's when midnight struck, and so that was kind of a fun little thing that we did, which actually wasn't that long ago. But the problem was that I was, very inebriated at the time, so I don't remember much of it, so that was kind of so I'd have to look back at that. There. Oh, what? Shoot. I wanted to take you guys on a little tour around the workshop, but I can't because I'm tethered to the wall right now with the power. Actually, how much batteries left? Okay, yeah, not enough. I could bring you guys around the workshop and show you around the new place, but maybe next time. Maybe next time. What else have we got here? Yep, right. Oh, somebody said something. You mentioned sometime you're going to do some sewing. Got anything to show? No. So I've got a little bit of stuff that I did on my own time, off camera, because I haven't had a camera. Of course, I don't particularly want to use that cell phone because it's very poor quality. Unfortunately not. No. That's another thing that I'm trying to get decent at, because the stuff that I've done has been pretty rough around the edges, and when I say rough around the edges, I mean really bad. So, no sewing stuff just yet, unfortunately. I'm still planning to do it in the future, but take that with a grain of salt, right? I'm so lucky with the time period that I chose. I have pictures and proper text and tag pieces. I know. 15th century is really good for that sort of thing, just because there's so much that's still around. There's a cat in there. There's so much that's still around, and which is really nice. And you're absolutely right. I am very lucky with the time period that I have chosen. I mean, yeah, because like my buddy is doing 13th century stuff, like I was saying before, and I'm trying to put together a kit, and I'm coming back from doing a bunch of 15th century stuff, and it's like looking at like the 4 sources that we have, and it's like, this is what I've got to work with. Come on. So yeah, I can't even imagine what it's like when you're doing proper reenactment and stuff for ancient stuff. That's got to be absolutely mind-boggling. Thoughts on the English chivalric tactics versus the French, knights fighting on foot versus horseback? Yeah, it's a very interesting difference between the two. You can definitely see some of the advantages between both, I think. And one interesting thing. Hey, kitty, you want to come up? cat's at my feet. One interesting thing. There she goes. She's not having it. So an interesting is that other countries started adopting more of the English style during and after the 100 Years' War. Dr. Tobias Campbell, he wrote an article about this. I think it was called "To Teach the Frenchman Courtesy," and he's kind of detailing how they, when I say they, I mean like other nations in the medieval era, particularly 15th century and afterwards, they started adopting more of the sort of English style of fighting on foot. And so I would recommend reading that. It's called "To Teach the Frenchman Courtesy." It's a really good read, and I think that would probably be able to give you a lot more detail than I could, to be perfectly honest. But my thoughts on it are, they both coexisted for a while. Each of them were used in large numbers in many time periods, so obviously they both had merit. It's probably worth researching more before saying anything of much note about it. But yeah, definitely there must be something to it. Jason. Oh, excuse me. Did not expect to get smacked by a cat. I'll be right back and clean these off. This is what I came here for, right? Watching me clean my glasses. There we go. That'll do the trick. The dwarf armor from The Hobbit. From what I remember about dwarf armor in The Hobbit, I was a little bit less fond of it, particularly the helmets. Because one thing I noticed that they had these really big kind of blocky, angular ribs going across it in kind of a that way orientation. I wasn't particularly fond of that, just because from an armor standpoint, it doesn't make much sense. Because there'd be two ways of doing that. First of all, would be making the armor actually that thick in those places, which wouldn't be conducive. It would be very heavy. And then the other way would be embossing it in that way, which also, embossed helmets certainly existed, and it would be totally within the realms of doing that, but that doesn't seem like the most practical design for the use of embossment and that kind of raising around a helmet. So I don't remember much else about them, unfortunately. I'm about looking forward to the next review. Hey, you take care, Connect Brew, Canic, Mr. Brew. Yeah, you have a good one. Living Cat script. I like it. Living Cat script. Maybe I'll have to make a parody account or something, right, for myself. Somebody do me a favor and make a parody account of Living Manuscript called Living Cat Script. That would be fantastic, because you know that you've made it once you have a parody account. Yeah. Yes, we are in fact always open for puns. Make cat armor. Ooh, that's a good idea. I've seen some of those cat armor that one guy did. I forget the artist's name, but he made these little cat armors. That would be interesting. I think the hardest part would probably be fitting the armor to the cat. Just arranging it on the tiny little cat body. That would be pretty tough. Oh, yeah. That would be a fun little thing to do, though. Cat armor. Shoot. All right. I should probably call it quits to the live stream for tonight, I think. So maybe a closed helmet shaped with cat. That would be interesting. Okay. Well, now you got me going again. So I've been talking with one of my fencing friends for a while now. This has been in the conceptual stage for ages now. Is that we want to make a fencing helmet for her, or like a helmet with perforated helmet and visor and everything for fencing. And we'd like to make it in as like a burgonet sort of style, but I'm going to desperately try to emboss it into a fox head because she really likes foxes. So definitely gonna be making a video about that one because that's just too cool not to do. So you might get your wish kind of just with foxes instead of cats. It's 3 o'clock in Sweden. Yeah. I mean, that's fair enough. What kind of welding do I do? I use wire welding. I use a particular kind of gasless welding because gas is expensive, and this gasless wire welding, I've got my welder right down there. It does the job, but yeah. So I use a gasless wire welder. I forget what exactly the specs of it are. If you're in the United States and have access to Harbor Freight, that's where I got it, because I get apparently everything from Harbor Freight. I mean, I get like my hammers and things from flea markets and whatnot, so yeah. 12:30 and in the middle of summer. Yeah, we've got like a foot of snow out there right now. Yeah, favorite piece of armor, Rohan and the Standard Center. Yeah, I agree with Bancroft. It does look very nice, and it looks like it functions well, but yeah, it seems like it functions well, but it does look nice. Absolutely, but yeah, I think I'm going to call it there for the night, fellas. So, if anybody has any closing remarks, speak now. Otherwise, I'm probably gonna call it there. Okay, take care, Kyle. All right, folks. Well, hope that you all enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll probably do another stream soon. I'm hoping to do some more videos soon now that I've got a little bit more time on my hands. And yeah, I'll edit some of those. I just got a bunch of video lying around, so I'll just string them all together. So yeah. All right, folks. We'll see you later. Thank you everyone for coming along. Oh no, let me off. Whew.